Welcome. This is Rewind Podcast, brought to you by Broken English 101, shot by Goodly Productions. I have some beautiful black brothers here with me today. Once again, just to reiterate what this is a conversation of an extension of the conversation that we have on the platform on the show. We have those questions that maybe don't make it to the actual platform, so we bring those here. We have a dialogue with you guys because we definitely want to deepen that conversation, and as well as like keep the audience involved, throughout all avenues of, the Broken English show. So I want to introduce y'all real quick, but then we're going to get into some backstory and then we'll get into some of these questions. So we have Ephraim and Mathias here with us today. How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Real good. Look,
I'm doing very good.
They got the sultry voices on already.
Hey, I'm just solid.
Yeah,
I'm doing what I can do
every day that I wake up.
The way
what I'm saying, I'm blessed.
I'm weak. No, we had our show last night, and like I said, these brothers did amazing. One of our more entertaining performances that we've had on the Broken English show. Last year was our first full complete year. We kicked off our second season last night. So thank you guys for being on the platform. Mathias, you kicked us off, bro. You kicked us off last night, man. Like, I'm always impressed with that impersonation piece. Like, talk to me about the impersonation piece and how that came together.
It's so funny. Like I talk about it a lot because it didn't even start off as a poem. It actually started off with my nieces. So like, I don't know. My wife says that I'm like the soft one when it comes to my nieces. I don't think I'm soft, but I think it's really hard for me to like actually be mad at them, be actually like actively mad at them, or like to tell them to do something. Mm-hmm. And so I found out I was like, I can't do it. Like the person that is me, Mathias, he can't do it. But who has no problems? You know what I'm saying? Getting under your skin a little bit, Denzel Washington. And so I have to put myself in that mode, you know what I'm saying? Whenever they toys is out, whenever they overacting, I just got to put myself into that little mentality. And then I was just like, hey, man, this is a pretty solid little accent, man. Let me go ahead and apply it to something else. And then I wrote the poem, and then, it came to birth, man. But it's always like a really fun thing to do because I think that it's one of those things that catches audiences off guard. You know what I mean? Because like you kind of started off, and the initial premise is fairly serious, and so the secondary premise that you put it under, which is pretty much what you walk away from remembering, is that the actual Denzel piece. So no, I appreciate that, and I appreciated being able to perform it there because I really feel like it was received really well. So it was a really good space.
It was dope, man. Like just having that ability to go that much deeper into the craft to where you're doing personification pieces is really dope. Like, and to see you grow as a poet, like, cause I've seen you maybe since 2015, 2016. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk about was both of y'all's individual journeys with poetry. Because on multiple different scenes, I've come into contact with you guys. Like we've kind of been perpendicular to each other, and so ever. Like I saw you a lot down at, I think it was Writing Wrongs or
Writer's Block.
Yeah. So you were doing a lot of slam stuff. Like when did you start to get into the slam stuff, and then in the Columbus scene?
Yeah, so getting into slam actually was 2015 as well. So yeah, I met Mathias like super soon once I started slamming. I looked it up on, first I was like, I decided December 2014, I want to do poetry. I'm going to make that a career. Let's see what's up. So I go on the internet like, how to make it as a performance poet. And it mentioned slam. And so I just looked up the closest slams to me, and it was Columbus and Pittsburgh. So the first slam I did was in Columbus, January 2015, and I absolutely loved it. I'm already competitive, but I wasn't really athletic. And so I didn't get to compete as much as I wanted to. And this was my opportunity to like consistently compete, and I already see that aspect when I perform poems. Even if it was an open mic, I'm like, who got the loudest claps? Who got asked for a feature after? Who got the most compliments? They said, ooh, when he was up there with the other person's guy. So I'm like, there already was in some people's minds, I like this more than that, but there was no way to really actually gauge that. And it's not that those 5 random judges say that for sure, but at least provides some extra context to how maybe the room is feeling. So even in a slam, it's like the best way for me to lose is if the audience thinks like the judges was tripping. You know what I'm saying? Like if the scores come out and I lose and everybody's like fair, I'm like, okay, then I didn't do good enough, you know? But if they like, no, recount, I'm like, all right, cool, I got the room, you know? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, just from 2015, I just kept at it, going to as many slams as I could, and just help sharpen my pen and help make sure I could always connect to an audience.
Got you. And Mathias, I know you slammed as well too.
Yeah, somewhat.
What year were you slamming?
Really around the same time. I feel like when I met. So when we met, it was actually was it at Writing Wrongs or it was at Writer's Block?
Nah, it was at Writer's Block.
It was at Writer's Block. But actually, I remember because I remember seeing you in Akron too. So was that before?
Nah, that was after.
That was after.
It's
okay.
deep roots, deep connections, man. Like once you involved, man.
We was on the same slam team at
first
one
ever
point.
slam team.
Yeah, like nah.
Was it was your first one too, wasn't it?
That wasn't my first.
Okay, never mind.
But
veteran already. You know what I'm saying?
That was my second slam team.
Okay.
But yeah, like you know what? You know what's so funny? I feel like I remember when we went to Steve Abbott's show, which is also like Steve Abbott's show is a show that it's going to be. This is this last year, but it was so Scott's show is like just had its final show a couple weeks ago. 25 years, some they're deep. Steve Abbott's show, another one that's like over 20 years that's going to be shutting down soon, but man, they have like a really strong legacy. I remember we went there because, you know, Scott took us there so we could I don't know, I don't think it was a slam. I think it was just like an open mic. Wasn't it?
I remember it might have been a slam. Was that the one where he was like, do y'all thing, y'all figure it out?
Yeah. Was
that a slam? It might have been I think it was a slam.
That sounds like some Scott. Hey, some wisdom.
We went there and I remember that was the first time I had really, I think, sat with like watching your poems and actually being like, okay, I'm supposed to be figuring things out when it comes to like not just being like a fan, being like be able to figure things out. And one of the things that the entire team kind of walked away from was like your performance chops, like you performed like somebody who's really competitive. You know what I'm saying? You performed like, man, like you went in there, you figured out, okay, the things that work, the things that don't work, and you did it kind of surgically, you know what I'm saying, with like each like line, each kind of part, because like you could tell the parts of your poems that, you know, maybe you saw this poem before, but this time when you're seeing your poem, like you're seeing what a surgeon would have done to it afterwards. And so, yeah, man, that era of me being kind of in slam, I think like really, I mean, slam is like how I met my wife, matter of fact, but that era of me being in slam, I think it taught me a lot. I don't think I walked away with the same things as a lot of other people kind of walk away with slam from. But I mean, just from what you're saying, I mean, it's still like a really, really great tool. And I think that for anybody that is looking to really sharpen their performance chops, especially, I mean, writing as well, but I mean, definitely when it comes to like your performance chops, because I've seen a lot of people go in there with poems that it's like, all right, that's solid. But the way they perform it, it's like, oh man,
I've seen it too.
You did that.
For
so
sure.
yeah,
that's and I actually like, I like that we have a reference point to where, you know, slams in 2015 around that time period. Talk about the growth as an artist from that particular time to now and the poems that y'all are doing. Because like I remember seeing you coming down, you and Damien used to come down all the time, kick shit. Like we used to go up in Cleveland and see y'all, like, and you being at the Nest, like when I first moved to Columbus, like the Nest was the first place that I got involved with that it felt like home. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I got there and y'all were there doing y'all thing. Like talk to me about y'all growth and entry point from the slams to where y'all are in performing right now.
Man, I'm so grateful for what you said too. I'm like super appreciative because if I talked about myself back then, I'm like everything was trash. I was terrible, and it's interesting because like looking back at your work, I feel like I want constant evidence that I got better, and sometimes you forget the impact of what you're doing because you want to prove to yourself I'm so much better now. How could that have still impacted somebody? And it's like no, like there's all these different steps you take in different moments, but it's still gonna hit somebody. There's artists too where I'm like they rebrand themselves and they start coming out with old work and they're like get rid of the stuff they used to have, and I'm like I still like that just because you feel like I want to listen to that, and so it's interesting for that, but it's definitely really different. I think around that time we first met, I was still doing a lot of preaching, terms of this is what y'all need to know. Y'all need to figure out. This is my message to you. And the more I saw different poets and art, I realized all my favorite artists, they existed so deeply in their own work. And so it's like, where am I? I'm not in my poems. And there was more than one time where I did a poem, I wrote all mine, and someone thought I stole someone else's poem. But it was because I wasn't present enough. And I realized, like, I need to write poems where if somebody else said this out loud, either it could not be true or it would not make sense, because I'm so deeply into that poem. And so that slam really helped me make sure I'm telling my story and reaching people through being reflective as opposed to being like, get it together. And so that's an aspect of growth that I got just over the years.
You know, I think I do this I'm part of this program, Youth Mike, back in Columbus, and one of the things that we like with a lot, especially like the younger poets that are coming up, is they're watching people do poems, and they're watching people that have messages that are just like what you said. They're so far detached from the person that they are, right? From their lived experience. They're just trying to tell you, okay, this is what you should do about the economy, about capitalism, about all that. And I'm like, and that's not even necessarily to say that, okay, you can't have a message, you can't have something to say, but it's just to say that, that preaching mentality where you're like, man, I have to be the vessel that teaches everybody the lessons. But it's like, do the lessons live in you? Like, do you walk those lessons? Are you a person that's like part of that walk? And I think that for me, especially coming from, a little bit of my background, like I used to be a Jehovah's Witness growing up. So like we would literally like every Saturday we would be at somebody's door like, you need to change your life. And I'm serious about that. And so like I think that I think coming out of that and being able to kind of see like just like kind of that portion of it kind of reflected in so many people's work when it comes to slam, when it comes to like, no, they every single time they get on stage, they gonna tell you need to change your life. You see all those people over there, like they're the wrong people. But I'm like, man, like I really, the people that I really enjoy watching the most, or the people that I really enjoy their work the most, are the people that can look inside and be like, man, these are the things that I am wrong. Like I'm not even just talking about stuff that I was wrong, but I've changed and I'm better and I'm great now. Like no, like I really like watching the people who like, I am a flawed person with these flawed dynamics that can speak to somebody that's on the other side, that can really speak to you and be like, okay, well, listen, I'm not perfect, but I'm presenting the person that I am. And so I think that I really appreciate that the point that you made like at the beginning when you're like, you know, you want constant evidence that you're getting better, because it's not even just about the poems. You know what I'm saying? Like I want constant evidence that, you know, before I was a person that would judge everybody in the audience immediately because I got the microphone. So because I get the microphone, I get to make the judgments. But man, like, am I actually building a community? Am I actually building a camaraderie where I'm like, man, I got some stuff to work on, y'all. Let me talk about it. Here's this poem where this stuff that like I'm really dealing with and I'm really like trapped in and locked in with. So yeah, I think that journey as a poet, and like really when it comes, especially in slam, because like in slam you just get to experience so many of those poems back to back to back to back to back. So that process and sharpening yourself is a good one. It's a holistic journey.
Yeah, that's dope. I like that you say that, because that kind of resonates with, I guess, what we try to represent as a platform and as a group, because like some of these guys, like there's some of my favorite artists, like the vulnerability that they put into their work, the transparency, like to be able to be like, bro, like this is what people are actually going through, and it to be relatable, and everybody has a different experience. Like, and I heard that in y'all performances, bro. Like both of y'all had, I don't know, like y'all both took a different vantage of y'all's, you know, perspective and kind of put it in this interesting way last night. And do y'all have a poem that is challenging for y'all to perform, that maybe challenged you to write or anything like that more recently in y'all sets that y'all do now?
Because I'm like, some of them that be most challenging, I'm like, this is for special occasions. And those exist, you know, for sure. There's one poem I have called Haunting, and I'm really talking about my experiences as a father and how I feel like absence has been this haunting presence. And going through the lineage of fathers before me and recognizing like how sometimes the absence feels involuntary, you know? And even when you're trying so hard to fight even, you know what I'm saying? And so that is always just, it's just difficult, you know what I'm saying? Because the emotions are difficult. And it's definitely like a super special occasion. It's like something in the room told me I'm supposed to do this here today because somebody else is going through this and needs to hear this. Other than that though, as far as that, I do like really actively doing my sets though. I mean, I guess a lot of times though, it's like trying to listen to what the room is saying and listen to myself, what I'm saying, like, and find the balance between that, so that it feels purposeful, intentional, and, you know, divine in terms of like, this is what's supposed to happen tonight.
Got you.
Yeah.
That's a good. I feel like the poems that I'm writing now, I don't think I've written a poem that's been challenging to me in a really long time, and that's not necessarily. I don't think about that as a negative. I think I'm just more open now. So I think a lot of the stuff that I'm processing, even if it's something like really deep or if it's something that can be really intrusive to myself, is like I'm ready to put it out there.
Got it.
I think that probably one of the poems that's still hard for me to perform, that's become harder for me to perform over the years. I wrote this poem, Dinner, and this was like years ago, and this was actually one of my first poems that I was like taken out and like slamming with, and it's interesting because it's like it's about my father.
I was about to say that's the father poem.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's been hard about it is because it's like in the poem the poem is from the viewpoint of of a conversation between me and my father. And it's I think the reason why it's harder is because like as you get older, you start growing into like the age where you met your father, you know what I'm saying? Like when you was like a kid, like this is like, I am now like the age that like most of my memories of my father, like my father was. And so you kind of start, I don't want to say, because it's not even necessarily resonating. Like that's probably the wrong word. But it's like you're looking on the other side of the glass and you're like, man, like I know how easy it could have been to be him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that.
And that's like it's a trippy space, man. Like I think especially as black men, because I think one of the things that we encounter very consistently is like mortality. You know what I mean? And I think about, you know, not to sound like grim or morbid, but like I think about like the fact of like death a lot. You know what I mean? And it's like it's permanent, and it's something that I think when you're a kid, you feel more or less like invincible. So when you're looking at the future and you're looking at your parents and you're looking at people that are setting these examples, like you can hold these grudges because you're like, I'm going to be here for a long time. But man, like when you get to the age that they were when they were making all the mistakes that you're holding them accountable for, you're like, man, like stuff is fleeting. You know what I mean? Like these are important times. So I think I look back at that poem and I don't regret the writing of it, and I don't even regret the intent of the poem, but I think the poem itself is performed and I think intended with like a lot of like anger and like kind of like frustration at the person that, you know, I'm pointing to, which is him. But it's just to say that like a lot of that stuff you don't really like as you start to come into that age and you're starting to think about kids yourself, you start thinking about like growing up and stuff like that. You're like, man, maybe the anger that I have towards him, like, man, no matter what mistakes that you're probably gonna make in your child, because like I would assume it's unavoidable, right? Like you're gonna make some mistakes, but like, you know, do I want my kid at age 30, 31 being like, man, this poem's gonna live forever? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wanted to say with that, I guess one of the things that really frightened me is that I'm at a point now with like the same where it's like I'm starting to understand, or not, like you said, kind of see it. Like I can see how you would have made that decision. I can understand how you would have thought that way. But I'm not in a place of anger or spite, but I still have no desire to rekindle that relationship. So it's not because of once I get rid of the anger, I want to come back. It's just like, you know what, I'm settled and I'm fine, but also I don't need this, you know? Yeah. I'm perfectly fine without it. And I don't feel like just because we share blood, I have to, because I would think like if my father was a stranger I wouldn't be like, we should be friends. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, what frightens me so much is that I don't want my son to feel that way, where you can think if we can heal, then you'll automatically want the relationship, and knowing like that's not the case. Like it can just grow into whatever, you know? And so I guess on a little flip side of that, like how that understanding also is frightening, you know, where healing is not always the pathway to, I guess, desire of relationships.
So, and this might be like kind of off the beaten path. So I don't know if this is like, because I want to ask you, because I feel like your perspective is like really, really important. Especially, I listen to you do poems, and I'm like, this is a person who can cut deeply and like so deep into himself, and kind of showing you these aspects that a lot of people just, they view themselves as like the consistent protagonist in their narrative. And so they're this good, like even if there's bad stuff that you could be saying, it's like that'll never come through in their poems. That'll never come through in their work. And I really appreciate that about your work, because it's like, it's not even this, it's not saying that you're the villain. It's saying that you are the person that you are. And you don't get that a lot from in poems. And I think that like I resonate with a lot of the stuff that you talk about in your poems because of that, because you can resonate with that person. And just like when it comes to like the fatherhood stuff, because I think like I'm in a similar place where it's like I'm not like, I don't have a particular desire to necessarily rekindle that relationship. But one of the things that I found as I got older is, you know, if my father was like a bomb, right, and it's like dropped in the middle of a city, like I lived in the house that the bomb dropped on, right? And then there's other people in my family, like they might have lived like in the area, in the neighborhood, maybe they lived like a city over. They felt some of the effects. And so years later, maybe some of the stuff that maybe didn't happen directly to them, but because it didn't happen directly to them, like they can forgive. They can get over some of the stuff. And then you start seeing things in the family where people are, you know, they're kind of enveloping him in, and which I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing, because I think people need community. I think people need love, and I don't think people deserve, you know, excommunication for like unless they're like these horrible monsters, right? Which is just to say, like, is there like a feeling of like resentment that ever comes? Because I can be honest when I say like there is some of that in me, in a lot of spaces where I'm like, man, like y'all welcoming bro back, y'all are cool with bro, and like do y'all understand? Like I'm his seed, you know what I'm saying? I'm his son. Like if nothing else, you know what I'm saying? Y'all should. Like if y'all gonna take somebody's side, like take my side. But it's not even necessarily like a fact of them taking sides. It's like this person is one of us, regardless of what he's done or they've done. Like this person is one of us. So do you ever feel like a resentment from that, or do you?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the resentment that was there passed through just like it turned into sympathy. And one of the biggest things though, even watching certain arguments growing up, I would be like seeing the tactics my father would use and wanting to like step in and argue for my mother, you know? And it's like, this ain't even sound arguments. This is how he's flipping the, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, dang, I want you to.
You felt that then?
Yeah, when I was a child, I'm like, I want to be able to like, see how he's using this big word, throw you off. That's not even his main point, you know? And I want to like jump in and like, just let me talk for you. I feel like, I don't know, even developing certain argument tactics was probably like in defense of my mother. Is that a poem? I don't know. But
write it down, brother, write it down.
Yeah, that's it.
And so like getting older, there wasn't as much resentment as like hearing maybe certain conversations and being like, you know, is my mother prepared to have that conversation? Like, will she be safe in that conversation? And so it was more of a protective as opposed to like resentment towards him as a person. Like, so then later on, when I didn't feel that worry, like her talking maybe about talking to him or whatever, was like, whatever, I know you good. You know what I'm saying? So I the resentment, I would say, faded. And now, like, there's certain moments, I guess to give extra context, like I've been in court for 6 years over visitation. You know what I'm saying? And just trying to get back into my son's life. And it wasn't until this past year, 2022, where we was able to have conversations on the phone. So it was just this super long period of time of just no contact. And it's mad painful. There's times where like I hear the hesitation in his voice in terms of wanting to talk to me, and it's the same I have when my father calls me, and I'm like not really trying to be on the phone for real, and it's like that is the same tone I have, and how can I work to where he wants me to be there, you know what I mean? But I'm not physically there. I have to try to work from all these miles apart, you know, and work through the courts so that we can be in the same space again. But there's all these reminders of like, I feel so sorry for my father right now because he's probably having the same feelings I have. And it's worse because that doesn't make me want to say, well, shoot, let me make sure then he don't have to deal with this pain, so I'm mad present, you know? And it's like, it's that possible, you know? So yeah, I guess it's mostly just sympathy. Empathy. What is the suffix of pithy?
How do because these are heavy conversations and things that you go through when it comes to like really understanding and having awareness of yourself and how, you know, you might project things because of something that may have happened and stuff like that. You talked about the poem with your dad, like, dang, like I'm thinking about it now. And yeah, for sure. So how does all that kind of accumulate into how backstep? We had a question last night about limitations as artists. Do y'all have any type of boundaries that y'all put on what y'all allow yourselves to share on stage? You talked about, hey, there's maybe a particular calling or a feeling that I may do something like this, but is there a hard boundary to where you're like, you know, this is for me because I needed this type of work through or healing to get through maybe some of the stuff that y'all just talked about?
It mostly exists competitively because if I'm outside of that, I was pretty good at maintaining my safety as a performer. And with that, there's just, you know, I've seen certain performers who don't think about their emotional safety when they're sharing. Because I think when you're sharing, you're obviously doing it for other people, but you have to consider yourself. And I've seen people not do that in order for the reaction or whatever else. And so I was pretty good at that. But competitively, I was in a situation where there was a poem I wasn't emotionally prepared to do, but I thought I could win if I did it. And got a terrible score. And now I feel terrible after, you know? And I learned from that moment where it was like, winning can never be the only reason you do this. You know, it's you have to pick a poem where if you lose, you're still satisfied that you shared that. And so that was the difference where I was like, oh, if someone told you you'll lose if you do that, oh, I'm definitely not doing it then. You know what I'm saying? So you must not want to share. And so that was the main lesson I had to learn. Because that extra pressure of like, I want to be the victor, I want to it'll make me step outside what I know is best for me. And so that put me back in there where it's like, don't ever do that again. Remember why we're here. Remember why we're sharing in the first place. Remember why we're artists in the first place. We do enjoy the W, but the W comes from making people feel, you know, and so you have to also think about your own feelings. Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah, I think that as far as limits, I think I've always done fairly well at only bringing poems to the table that I feel like I could share and be okay with afterwards. I also think there's a lot of poets that the reason that they end up crossing that boundary is because it's like they look at the linear like viewscape of their life and they're like, man, like how many poems are here, right? And so even if they're in the midst of some of the like the worst trauma that like it could be happening to them like right now, like the past 10 days have been like the worst days of my life. And they're like, man, like the past 10 days have been the worst day of my life. Like I probably got like 16 or 17 good poems out of this. You know what I'm saying? like I got a good, if I need to end the round with something strong, like this is how the thing that happened 2 days ago, that would be perfect. And I think that's like, I don't know. I would feel so exhausted if that was like how I looked at poems, you know what I mean? I think that, yeah, you have to have things that are you know what I'm saying? Things that, you know, there's things that would happen that the closest person to me is like closest human to me is my wife, right? And so there's things that like, you know, these are the things that me and my wife share. So it's like if I'm not about to take something from there and be like, man, how can I make this into 3 minutes and 5 seconds worth of like straight like art. But yeah, no, I think there's just lines that exist that I don't really at the very least ever test those limits of, just because I mean most of the poems that I'm writing even nowadays they're personal, but they're more happy, or maybe like the goal isn't to like dig deep. Maybe the goal is to dig deep with like comedy or something like that. So, I don't really test those limits as much.
Dope. Okay. So we actually on time on this one, but I got some audience questions for y'all in this next part. But we gonna wrap this here. This is Broken English Rewind podcast. Thank you.